Hey, how's it going? Back out here in Port Royal, and I was out here a few weeks ago. I took a tour of their history museum, and the ladies inside had told me there were some historical buildings across the street in town here. So I drove over, and I was surprised by how much was back here. So just thought I'd come back out, do a walkthrough, and I guess I'll start from the beginning. Rappohannock River is right over that ledge there. And let's see, the area has been inhabited by Native Americans for about 11,000 years. The group that resided were the Nan-Tauticone tribe, and 400 to 600 members. And they actually named the river the Rappahannock. It means altering stream. John Smith mapped the area out, 1608. English settlement began 1650 by a guy, Colonel John Catlett. And there was a massacre, and he was killed in 1760. And then eventually, I can tell you, the town really became something around 1730. That seems like when everything was happening. And here's a painting of what they may have looked like. So, and back here is a historic home, and they call this Riverview. And it was the residence of the Lightfoot family. And just a side note, these hedges supposedly have been here since the 1800s. And yeah, so this is saying 1846. And a little side note about this place was a lady named Sally Tompkins. She was the only female commissioned Civil War officer. She lived in this house. So it's pretty neat. They've got these little Port Royal, these yellow flags flying everywhere. Over here is this place called Townfield, and it was originally built 1745, as the sign says. Many wings have been added over the years, and it was originally owned by this guy named Robert Gilchrist. And at one time, this was actually British headquarters during the Revolutionary War. So. And I can tell you this place has 8 fireplaces. Decided to walk up here toward Route 301, trying to stay consistent with the historical timeline of the town. And just looked on Wikipedia, and I saw as of 2010, population was 126 people. And the earliest census they had on record was 1850. And I believe it said there were 475 people, so that goes to show you it was a pretty thriving town. And yeah, it looks like what happened with most of these towns is that once the railroad was built, it kind of marked the end. So yeah, at the corner here of Main and Water Street, and across the street here, these 2 chimneys, it's what's left of the home of John and Dorothy Roy. And that's who they say that Port Royal was named after. And yeah, of course, major players in the town. They owned a big tobacco warehouse back behind where their house would have been. They also owned a ferry that crossed the Rappahannock right over there. They owned a tavern here in town. And Dorothy helped commission a rolling road that led to the warehouse. It was about 20 miles that stretched into Caroline. And it eventually became part of the King's Highway, and the King's Highway was the main artery that ran from Boston all the way down to Charleston. And another side note, let's see, once John died, pretty much everything fell into the hands of Dorothy. And so yeah, she owned and ran the big warehouse, and she became the first, they say, female entrepreneur in the colonies. And then I guess I'll also note that the warehouse was first chartered to a guy named John Buckner. It eventually fell into the Roy family hands, and Dorothy Roy is actually his granddaughter. So, and then I'll also let you know the town was officially chartered in 1744, and 1746 is when Dorothy died. So, all right, then across the street here, it's saying this is called the Lecky House, L-E-K-I-E, built 1775. I had read somewhere else it was built 1770 by the Hipkins family. And yeah, they actually, their family lived here for 175 years. So yeah, it's pretty impressive looking building. Headed down to the pier. And I think I had mentioned earlier there was a ferry that would cross over to Port Conway over on the King George side, and that was in operation until 34 when they went ahead and built a bridge. And this house over here, it's called the Bowie House, one of the earliest houses in the town, built 1740. And yeah, like I say, it was 1730s into the 1740s when Port Royal kind of became something. And something to note about this house, it's got a sandstone foundation, and the sandstone came from the quarry up in Aquia. And this guy, I want to say his name was James Bowie. He was a merchant and a land speculator here in town. And then another thing to note about Port Royal, it's where John Wilkes Booth died. And yeah, he crossed the Rappahannock. He briefly, he tried to stay at a house here in town. He was turned away, then went 3 miles further south to the Garrett Farm, and that's where he was captured and killed. More placards. And like I'm sure I've said, I know I repeat myself, but yeah, Port Royal became a port because it was about as far inland as the big ocean traveling ships could travel. All right, now I had said earlier, John Catlett was the original founder of the settler of the town, killed in an Indian raid. Then the town was, I guess, resettled by, okay, Anthony Buckner. Like I say, John Buckner is the one that opened up that, got the charter for the tobacco warehouse. Robert Taliaferro, which that would be pronounced Tolliver. The Tollivers were big players, early Virginia, big Virginia first family. And I can tell you, he had a house a little further south down the river, in an area they call it Camden, and there's a big mansion there now, and that's where he resided. So, talks about, like I say, the Roys kind of founded the town. And yeah, Dorothy Roy, she started up that rolling road that went about 20 miles south. It connected to Bowling Green. Oh yeah, and this map over here, this is a Peter Jefferson map. Peter Jefferson would be Thomas Jefferson's father, and this is kind of a famous map of the colonial era. And Port Royal over here says Turner. I know the Turner family lived at Belgrove Plantation right across the river. That's where James Madison was born. Monroe, that's where James Monroe was originally born. George Washington was born in Pope's Creek, right in this area right here. Stratford Hall, Robert E. Lee. Taylor, that's going to be John Taylor. Let's see, he lived in here. He lived here in Port Royal, had a law firm. And this is going to be Mount Airy Plantation. It's going to be there. Anyway, all right. So, okay, here you go. Some steamboats over here, and a little kind of wharf, pontoon bridge. All right, in that house that I started the video in front of or behind, Riverview. That was actually Union headquarters there briefly. General John Abercrombie. All right, anyway. Walk around this pier. Pretty cool looking trikes. And something else pretty interesting I should mention, the Rappahannock was pretty famous for having a lot of pirate activity in the 1700s. And there was a French pirate, his last name is Pullman, who was killed not too far from here, a little further south from what I understand, but not too far from Port Royal. And there's a creek around here named after him. It's called Pullman's End, meaning that's where Pullman met his end. And something else pretty interesting, of course Port Royal was a major tobacco port, but it was also famous for importing thoroughbred racehorses. And Caroline County is pretty much the birthplace of horse racing in North America. And you may know Secretary at the Racehorse that won the Triple Crown 1973, was born here in Caroline County. And it was a guy named John Baylor who lived here, who's famous for importing hundreds of thoroughbreds. So pretty interesting. All right, keep walking around. So walking down King Street, and I'm following this map. I grabbed this when I was over at that at the History Museum, and you'll see the grid there. It's pretty much 3 roads going north and south, 4 roads going horizontal, and this looks like one of the main roads. Big map of Caroline County, Port Royal. There's that little Camden Plantation house I told you, that's just a tad south. Alright, here's some Port Royal / Caroline County residents. There's the guy John Baylor I told you imported the thoroughbred horses. Oh, William and Clark from the famous explorers Lewis and Clark. And then his older brother was George Rogers Clark, and he was a major player in the Revolutionary War. He was pretty much the commanding general in the Western Theater out in the Ohio Territory and all that. Yeah, they've got some work to do on this building if they're trying to restore it. And this is the old Masonic Lodge. And a side note, the Masonic Lodge first was chartered in 1754 in Port Royal. And I read somewhere it said that it was the second one chartered in the country. Also the Town Hall Lyceum. A Lyceum is pretty much a lecture hall. And the first floor was the Town Hall. And this actual building was built 1852 actually. And then eventually became a general store at one time. Yeah, so. And over here is the Fox Tavern. Probably the most popular tavern in Port Royal. Over there. And anyway, this place was built 1755 by Captain William Fox. And he was often away at sea, so really the place was run by his wife Anne. And its claim to fame is that George Washington stayed here on at least 3 occasions. George Washington spent the night here January 14th, 1760 at a cost of 5 shillings. And when the tavern was sold in 1795, one of its selling points was its elegant billiards table. And altogether, obviously, Port Royal thrived in Port Town in the 1700s, and altogether there were 90 licenses issued for taverns. So, anyway, keep walking. Pretty nice house. And over here is another pretty important one. It's a house where John Wilkes Booth temporarily stayed while he was fleeing after the assassination of Lincoln. And it's called the Broken Borough Peyton House. It's where fugitives John Wilkes Booth, his accomplice David Harold, and 3 Confederate soldiers had arrived. Let's see, 2:30 p.m. April 24th, 1865. And this was 10 days after Lincoln was shot. And the man of the house, the owner, Randolph Peyton, was away. And then his sister, Sarah Jane Peyton, let them in, and they had just said that Booth was a wounded Confederate soldier. So they let him in. He was in the he stayed in the front hallway, but after I believe it was just a couple hours, she reconsidered. She thought it wasn't right that all these men were in the house when the man of the house was away. So she recommended they go 3 miles south to the Garrett farm, and of course that's where they met their end. And they say in its heyday this was the nicest house in the town. 1765. Alright, so then across the street it says this is the Catlett house from 1760, but I can tell you that the Buckners lived here. Alright, so I had told you originally John Buckner had owned the tobacco warehouse that eventually his granddaughter Dorothy Roy owned. Well, she had a daughter, and her daughter married a guy, William Buckner. It gets confusing, I know. Anyway, so this was their house. Better shot. Whew. Yeah, they're pretty ambitious if they're going to have all these buildings restored. And over here, a tavern from 1750. And this sign actually is going to say Fair Printing. So I'm reaching the end of my map, so don't know much about this place. I see it says it's the Murray House, 1750, and it looks kind of like what I'm guessing is your typical just middle class house from that time period. Some more information I can give you. I think I said earlier the entire town is broken up into 18 blocks. Each block has 4 lots. Each lot is half an acre, so I guess you can do the math there. Over here this says tenants 1790. Again, don't have much information. Oops, on this one. So over here is the Port Royal Museum of Medicine, and this place was built 1850 by Dr. James Gravett, and this house was actually moved. It was 2 blocks down off Water Street back there, and it stayed in use as a doctor's office until 1981. And I need to check that place out. Yeah, medical museum inside. Some history I can give you on that is that Dr. Urquhart, or it might be pronounced Dr. Eckerd, was the one that pronounced John Wilkes Booth dead. Yeah, they called him down after he was shot, and he came down that evening. Booth was still alive, but he said he's pretty much not going to recover, and then he died the next morning. I believe it was 9 or 10 a.m. And pretty cool, they've got a war memorial here. Looks like a gun off a naval ship, and pretty fitting today's Memorial Day. And down here looks like I'm gonna assume these are going to be local residents, military service. Over here, a bunch of Civil War bricks. Oops, War of 1812. French and Indian War. Vietnam back there. Okay. John Catlett, great-grandson of James Madison, killed in that 1670 raid, it looks like, while he was by Indians while guarding the fort. John Taylor, famous resident here in Port Royal, he actually ran Hazelwood Plantation, which is just down Route 17, and he was a Virginia senator. And Turner's a big family. I know the Turners lived across the river over in Port Conway at Belgrove Plantation. (1907). Pretty neat. So this area is kind of the town green, the village green. Building over there is going to be the fire department. Here's the town hall. I know it was a school at one time. And they've got a portrait gallery in there I need to check out. Alright, blah blah blah, established 1744, major port on the Rappahannock. And looks like General Burnside considered crossing before the Battle of Fredericksburg, and I'm going to assume the river was just too wide right here, so yeah, he went up to Fredericksburg. Okay, so I've reached the end, and I'm going to take a right down Middle Street. Got a hostile dog barking at me. Yeah, so I'm walking down Market Street, headed toward the intersection of Caroline. And over here, the Johnson House, 1750, one of the older buildings in the town. Post office was here at one time. And this is the Timberlake House. And actually, it should be called the Gravitt House. The Dr. Gravitt that worked at that medical building over there. Yeah, that's where he's from. And just to let you know, altogether 15 rooms in there. You could tell at one time that place was pretty happening. All right, and so on this empty lot up here was a lady lived here named Judith Lomax. She was a poet, early 1800s. She was the first female to have a book of poetry published. And now I'm not 100%. She might have lived over closer to the river, but yeah. Anyway, she lived in Port Royal. Yeah, here's a small house. Looks like they're having a memorial celebration, and pretty cool. Got the flags going, and it says this is the Pearson House, 1775. So now I'm going to walk over here, Caroline and Frederick. And I'm headed toward that Riverview house, so I'm almost finished my tour here. Okay, that's it for my little historic tour of Port Royal. See ya.